Hi, my name is Katy Arrowood, and I'm here alongside
Aliyah Walker.
And we are here today presenting Chapter 9, which focuses on Salesforce recruitment and selection. So first off, I just want to briefly go over the learning objectives of this chapter. So the first one is just key issues driving recruitment and selection of salespeople. The second one being who is responsible for recruitment and selection. The third one being understanding job analysis and how selection criteria is determined. The fourth one being defining sources for new sales recruits. The fifth one being explaining selection procedures. And the last one being understanding equal opportunity requirements for this chapter.
So the company decides who has the responsibility to hire. And in the recruitment process, the managers should keep the company needs in mind. And because they're responsible for recruiting the new employees, they also have to take into consideration the Equal Employment Opportunity Act and its regulations.
So the decision process for recruiting and selecting salespeople, hiring the best employees is a difficult and complex task, and there's a variety of important issues that must be resolved when recruiting and selecting new salespeople. And then these issues are diagrammed here to your left. So establishing policy concerning responsibility for recruitment and selection, falling into analyzing the job and determining selection criteria. Next up, finding and attracting a pool of applicants, and lastly, developing and applying selection procedures to evaluate applicants.
So first level sales managers are responsible for straightforward sales jobs, new recruits who need no special qualifications, and turnover rates when they are high. Recruiting specialists are called in when the firm must be very selective in the hiring process, and personnel and top-level managers are called in when Salesforce prepares to hire actual managers.
So for the hiring quiz, I have the diagram located here to your right. So companies use a variety of tools to help them identify the right candidates. The primary focus is on how to do it from a manager's point of view. And these are just questions on how future employees could be rated during the hiring process.
So a company can conduct a job analysis, which determines the activities, tasks, responsibilities, and environmental factors that influence the how to meet the job requirements. And so a company can also provide a job description that details the findings of the job analysis. And they can also provide a statement of job qualifications related to the task that needs to be performed. And so this can be put on the website or the application.
Next up, we're going to be discussing who conducts the analysis and prepares the description. So in some firms, analyzing and describing sales jobs are assigned to someone within sales management. In other firms, the task is assigned to a job analysis specialist who is either someone from the company's personnel department or an outside consultant. Regardless of who is responsible for analyzing and describing the various selling positions within a company. However, it's important that the person collect the information about the job's content from two different sources. The first one being the current occupants of the job, and the second, the sales managers who supervise the people in their present job.
So some factors of a job description would be the nature of the product or the service being sold, the types of customers to be called on, specific tasks and responsibilities to be carried out, the relationship between the sales position and others within the organization, mental and physical demands of the job, and also it should describe the environmental pressures and constraints of the job.
So now we're going to be discussing determining job qualifications and selecting criteria. So the qualifications of a prospective employee should have to perform given sales job is the most difficult part of the recruitment and selection process. So the sales manager, perhaps with assistance from a workforce Planning specialists or vocational psychologists should consider the relative importance of all the personal traits of this future employee and characteristics already discussed. So these include physical attributes, mental abilities, and experience, as well as personality traits.
So some factors that affect the success of a salesperson's career would be the instability of residence, a failure in their own business within the past 2 years, an unexplained gap in their employment record, a recent divorce or marital issues could affect the salesperson's career, and excessive personal indebtedness.
So to the right in the diagram, we have an applicant interview form. So a written statement of job qualifications should be prepared that is specific enough to guide the selection of new salespeople. So these qualifications be reflected in forms and tests used within the selection process, like this one used here.
So when recruiting applicants, managers should use a well-implemented system. They can utilize their internal or external sources to actually find these applicants.
So as far as internal sources, internal sources consist of people already employed in the departments within the firm, and advantages listed here are established performance records known as entity, require less orientation and training, bolsters company morale, and must fully inform human resources of sales staff needs.
Some external sources are, you can utilize LinkedIn, Indeed, people that respond to advertisements, or even some referrals from people from the firm who could be employees of the firm that said, I know someone who would love to work here.
So leadership recruiting a global sales force. The challenge in this aspect is determining qualities and addressing cultural differences, and then focusing on sales tasks, relationship building skills, motivation, and being technological savvy.
So when recruiting hires, you can also use technology. And so again, you can use LinkedIn. You can also use Facebook or Twitter to find these new employees for the company.
So selection tools and procedures. Selection tools are listed here on the presentation. So after the qualifications necessary to fill a job have been determined, some applicants have been recruited. The final task is to determine which applicants best meet the qualifications and have the greatest aptitude for the job. So to gain this information, you need to evaluate each prospective employee. Firms typically use some combination of the following selection tools and procedures, such as application breaks, personal interviews, reference checks, physical examinations, and psychological tests.
And so you can use these composites of a psychological test or the personal interview to find the value in the employee and the validity of the actual test.
So although professional salespeople often has resumes to submit to prospective employers, many personal experts believe a standard company application form makes it easier to assess applicants. So a well-designed application blank helps ensure that the same information is obtained for all candidates, and it makes it an equal playground.
So a personal interview can be structured or unstructured. In a structured interview, a hiring manager will use predetermined questions, and these questions can be used to either indicate some type of unique strength or see what their limitations are. In an unstructured interview, a hiring manager would discuss a variety of different topics, and these topics may yield unexpected insights into who they are.
So if an applicant passes a face-to-face interview, a reference check is often the next step. So some managers question the value of references because they always say the nice things. However, a little resourcefulness, reference checks can be a valuable selection tool in the application process.
So in professional selling, it can be a physically demanding job, especially if you're selling door to door. And so most jobs are required to offer a physical to test your health, stamina, and physical ability. It's not required, but you should use caution and ask for a medical examination to do drug testing or any type of disease that could be caught by other people. And you should also take into consideration the American Disabilities Act and to only ask for this physical exam after the person has been hired.
So as far as test goes, a final set of selection tools used by many firms consists of tests aimed at measuring an applicant's mental abilities and personality traits. So the most commonly used tests can be grouped into 3 different types. The first one being intelligence, the second one being aptitude, and the last one being personality.
There are some concerns when doing these tests. They may not be predictable in terms of how well the employee will fit into the job environment. And also some tests do not take in consideration the creative types and type of people who deviate from social norms, professional norms. And so also it does not take in consideration the people that know how to manipulate the test results. And so with these tests, they should also never be discriminatory against race, gender, or it will be illegal.
So to avoid or at least minimize the preceding test problems, there are guidelines that need to be followed. So test scores should be considered one of several different inputs, and tests are only on abilities and traits relevant to the job. And when possible, use tests within internal checks for validity and conduct empirical studies to validate the test predictive value.
So managers should be knowledgeable of the Equal Employment Opportunity Act. And in this act, it also talks about the Title IX. And so with Title IX, discrimination is forbade. And this is against race, sex, religion, color, or national origin. And so none of these things should be discriminated against when hiring for new employees.
So the number of federal lawsuits along workplace discrimination is large and growing at a very fast rate. So a number of federal laws have extended the protection against job discrimination to include such factors as age and physical and mental disabilities, extending on to the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
So there are some questions that should never be on an application or an interview. And so to your right, you see that they're talking about nationality or race. So you shouldn't ask anyone what their race is, if they are an immigrant, or if their language is their first language or not. Also, when it comes to religion, do not ask an employee if the company policies are against the religion or affects any type of worship or holidays. Also, do not ask about their sex or marital status. So you do not want to ask what their gender is, what their spouse's gender is, and also what their future plans are for family. When it comes to age, do not ask what their age is unless they are a minor or considered a senior citizen over the age of 70. Also, do not ask about their physical disabilities, health problems, their weight or their height, and do not ask about their financial situation. So how much their income is, unless you're trying to give them a raise. And also, lastly, do not ask about their arrest record. That should not be, all of these things should not be on the application nor the interview.
Okay, so that concludes our Chapter 9 presentation on Salesforce recruitment and selection. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.